Then again, thank you very much indeed. What a pleasure to be here today with all of you as fellow travelers on a journey to reshape our future. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm very passionate about personal and organizational transformation. And during the last 25 years or so, I've worked in nonprofit and startups and major global companies. And I've made it my purpose to create better organizations. And I do feel there's still a lot for us to do. Whilst this so-called fourth industrial revolution is literally taking the world by its ears, our organizations have collectively produced also numerous outcomes that nobody really wanted. There's burnout and loneliness and hunger, inequality and ecological collapse. And by some estimates, more than $7 trillion are wasted every single year globally due to employee disengagement. But I do believe there's also hope. The winds of change have started blowing forcefully, and this current crisis, I feel, is bonding us all together like never before, and is allowing us to collectively reflect. Could we learn to make a difference to people and planet through our daily work? Can we maybe reshape our organizations to bring forth a more sustainable future? And indeed, could we save the world and still be home for dinner? Join me on a momentous adventure to give it a try. So without further ado, let us weigh our virtual anchors and set forth together towards the mysterious seas of personal and organizational change. And like humble sailors, ride the waves towards 6 ports of reflections along our journey. And these ports relate to the why, our values, the what, organizations, individuals, and teams, and finally the how, leadership, from purpose to wider impact. Alas, before we even set sail, we are already at our first port of call. As Stephen Covey once suggested, start with the end in mind. And if we embark to reshape our world, we should first check our bearings. And I very often encounter people who tell me very earnestly that they deeply desire to become agile or teal without ever really asking themselves the question why. And that is not surprising. We have created a seductively materialistic and individualistic narrative in our Western society where self-interested growth, productivity, stock markets have become ends in themselves. And in this pandemic of busyness, we've often succumbed to that hedonistic treadmill of money for money's sake. People start to work ever longer hours to attain status and wealth just to find out at the end that it doesn't really make them happier. And in creating ever greater riches for far too few, we've often ignored ecological externalities just to discover that our mother planet is at the brink of bankruptcy and the collapse of global climate will threaten the livelihoods of millions. So what do we really believe in? What do we really stand for? These questions are both existential and fundamental. We create organizations for a purpose, to achieve something together, which individually we could not possibly achieve. And I strongly believe that in the future, personal and organizational success must transcend a quest for money or shareholder value. And as Colin Meyer maintained at the World Economic Forum this year, the true purpose of organizations is to solve the planet's problems profitably. It is not just about profit and endless growth, but also about an inclusive and sustainable future for all stakeholders. Not bigger, but better. Not a question of marketing or charity, but as a matter of morality and justice. Exploitation and inequality are not economic laws, but inherent failures of our economic system. And here I want to strongly condemn all forms of discrimination. And in a world where traditional communities of churches and neighborhoods have been eroded, where scientific management has often filled gaps of meanings with the gospel of growth, and where work has become so central in our lives, where organizations are like small states, I believe businesses have to step up. As Immanuel Kant warned us a century ago, human beings must always be treated as an end in themselves, never as means, never as cogs in a machine. And today we need human-centric organizations more than ever to provide a place of meaning and community where people can grow and flourish. Hence, our quest shall be to transform our organizations to create greater value, attaining both collective purpose for all stakeholders and individual development and meaning profitably. But here, let us lay on even keel just a bit longer to examine what such a reshaped organization of the future could possibly look like. We live in an ever more complex world, facing ever faster changes, advances in technology and data, shortening half-life of knowledge and ever greater global interdependencies. As they say, today's the slowest day you will ever experience from now on. Hence, in these new 20s, we need to let go of the illusion, I believe, that work can be predicted or planned in detail. As BCG suggested last year, the companies that will win the 2020s are those who can compete on learning. From a paradigm of scalable efficiency that has dominated our businesses since the Industrial Revolution, we need to transition to a new world of scalable learning and development, from competitive to adaptive advantage, and from closed systems to boundaryless ecosystems. The simple truth is that our world has become too complex to be controlled just through bureaucracy. We cannot stand on a mountaintop and preach strategy down the hills to achieve successful execution. Today, I believe in order to thrive, we need to embrace uncertainty and maximize human flourishing at work, rather than just driving efficiency and productivity. Hence, I believe organizations of the future must harness ideas from everywhere and create an environment where people can and want to make a difference, tearing down those ivory towers and replacing our traditional hierarchies with increasingly fluid and modular structures, moving from centralized and extractive to more regenerative and distributive designs, where influence and authority is different from rank and position, where deep emotional bonds of community and trust prevail and employees have freedom to experiment, where many more people ultimately become their own CEOs. Yet more than structures, methodologies, or tools, the difference, I believe, lies in core principles. In humanocracies, the business of business is people. We cannot resolve the future of work with utilitarian thinking, just as we cannot understand quantum physics with Newtonian principles. And now we are plain sailing in open waters, on the lookout for our first true island of reflection, which is, of course, people. How can we unleash the creativity of our people? How to turn office workers into self-actualizing innovation privateers, right? For decades, we've been trained to see humans as strictly rational consumers in economic markets. In our businesses, we have treated people like easily replaceable human capital or as exchangeable human resources to be controlled. And as a result, more than 85% of employees globally feel unengaged. So going forward, we truly must put people first. We must relearn to cherish their uniqueness and design our organizations to fulfill their human needs, their sense of orientation, belonging, autonomy, self-esteem. Success is only when every human being at work has the ability to develop, to use their creativity, and to have impact. When agency becomes activism. And this won't be automatic. In a world where we are all required to wear many different masks, our public identity has often become disengaged from our inner life, and it has become challenging just to be with ourselves and with each other, resulting in dualisms and tensions. Therefore, I believe in deliberately developmental organizations. We must help individuals to recognize their own biases and needs, anxieties, attachment styles, defense and coping mechanisms in order to attain that self-esteem and agency, and to grow their ability to work with and care for others and generate meaning and value in service of the community. Our inner game is our outer game. Or as Frédéric Laloux once said, we can only go far into the we if we fully inhabit the I. And then by matching desires and competencies of individuals with meaningful activities, we can enable flow, personal development, and ultimately happiness at work. Yet happiness, as Aristotle suggested, is not about pleasure or wealth or income and how many followers we have on Twitter, always getting all we can, but a matter of growing our character in a lifetime of personal development. It's the cultivation of those virtues that make us good human beings. But of course, you will say, happier individuals will not be enough. Organizational learning is a team sport. So how can we channel the creativity of individuals into collective organizational learning and evolution at scale? Now, let me ask you, do you feel you can truly bring your ideas to the front rows of your organization? If not, you are not alone. Only about 20% of people feel their opinion counts, and 70% report that new ideas are met with hostility. And that's no surprise, is it? Because imagination often requires us to operate outside the rules of the game, which is a deeply political act. Blimey, we were in the doldrums. In my experience, if we want to enable self-organization and organizational learning at scale, we need to adapt the context for our teams at multiple levels in terms of structure, management processes, and team dynamics. And I think above all, we need to pay very careful attention to distribution of information, of knowledge, and of power. Existing systems often distort or suppress information. In the future, radical transparency, I think, should prevail. As they said, VC, everything is public unless it's harmful. Strategy becomes a firm-wide conversation. And in terms of power, central authority does not lend itself to decentralized experimentation and learning. Self-generative, complex systems need boundaries, but they will be stifled if positional power is imposed. And I've seen many agile implementations struggle because they never dealt with the existing power structures. So I believe we will see more ambidextrous organizations that can enable exploitation of the existing and exploration of the new, but it won't stop there. We are already witnessing experiments with meshed and adaptive networks of teams, market-oriented ecosystems like Hire, and interconnected circles in holacracy and sociocracy. And in terms of management processes, organizational learning requires both order and freedom. Bill Tobit speaks of liberating structures like principles and roles, routines, rituals, methodologies to enable and host that generative dialogue involving as many people as possible and supporting both single and double loop learning. And learning, I think, also entails mechanism to manage tensions. It's a fact that by its very nature, total consensus would overwhelm a complex system. And we need procedures to attain not consensus, but consent. And this also requires adaptation of HR and finance practices. Focus needs to move from individual high performers towards group dynamics and team dynamics. Compensation needs to correlate with team impact on the collective purpose, and influence must become a product of competence and not position. And I envisage that over time, our entire organization will become a laboratory of ideas, integrating action and inquiry into everything we do, to always keep sensing and exploring and experimenting whilst we're moving in teams and in peer communities of learning. Sounds like a plan? Full sail ahead, adventurers and business leaders, there's land in sight. Alas, this story wouldn't be exciting if it was simple to reach our destination. And indeed, unfortunately, with increasing complexity and urgency, leadership has become much more difficult. Business schools have for decades been training generations of managers and leaders in that seductive and simplistic logic of principal-agent theory, where a leadership elite who has the power instructs the masses of reluctant workers who have little power on what to do, deploying sticks and carrots as necessary to adjust their behaviors. Unfortunately, to move forward, leadership must radically change. In a world of self-organization, there is no place anymore for patriarchal commanders-in-chief narcissistically ruling by positional power and dominance. Agile leaders, we say, set destination, not direction. They focus on the why, not the how. Decisions are always made at the lowest possible level, close to the customer. And rather than telling people what to do, leaders today need to become experts in building and sensing, caring for, influencing organizational systems, coaching the individuals and the teams, and enabling that co-creation and emergence of a shared purpose. And in such a new world, we need chief communicators who earn the respect of their people by making personal sacrifices to serve the collective good, and chief connectors who can create a cultural force field of energy, fostering that psychological safety and trust, reinforcing transparency and embracing failure, displaying gratitude, compassion, kindness. And such a new transpersonal leadership paradigm is more than just EQ. It integrates intellectual, emotional, and spiritual intelligence. Future leaders will have to truly understand with heart and mind and soul how all hangs together in a web of life, including their own self. They lead beyond the ego, as John Knights writes, allowing time for awareness and reflection rather than always jumping into action, letting go to become vulnerable imperfectionists, hearing their soul knocking at the ego's door. And Bill Tobit calls these leaders alchemists, leaders who can access the magical mutual power of transformation, developing people to have more self-mastery and meaning, and providing that maternal holding space for liminal conversations. And I believe this is unfortunately where most of our ships are dead in the water. The maturity of an organization can never transcend the maturity and consciousness of its leadership. Leaders create culture with every move they make. If greater consciousness does not operate, a system does not possess the stability to let go of the past and transition to a new model without losing its sense of identity and cohesion. Hence, leadership, I strongly believe, is our forgotten SDG number 18 and our most important port of call. And just think about it. For traditional leaders who have risen the corporate chain by being in control, this is a very difficult challenge. What brought us here won't bring us there. If our definition of success is going up that ladder from VP to SVP to EVP, hierarchy prevails. If we dominate others to uphold our own egos, people around us will not flourish. If we seek to control an uncertain environment with ever more rigidity, self-organization will perish. And finally, if we try to shrink the complexity of the world to our own cognitive limits, we will fail. But how can we transcend? I really don't have all the answers, but in my experience, progression requires vertical development, facing our own shadows, letting go of our restrictive mental models, rather than intellectual leadership trainings. Responsible leaders, says Manfred Kitz de Vries, are not only born, they're twice born through a process of painful individuation, where every victory of the self will feel like a defeat for the ego, until we compassionately see all the facets of an interconnected whole. And above all, I believe it is about tapping into what really matters to us. If you close your eyes and listen hard enough and for long enough, I think you will understand what truly drives you, what life asks from you. Exploding with passion without shame, loving without measure, sensing the wonder of nature, serving others beyond the confines of yourself, and connecting to that essence of who you are and what you stand for allows you to let go of fear and the desire to control. And once you definitely commit yourself to serve a greater purpose, to serve all life, magically, synchronously, the world outside you changes too. And suddenly, leadership is not a tribe of special individuals with special traits, and not even a role, but about developing the leadership potential in everyone, about people no longer being victims of circumstances, but participating in the creation of new possibilities, about learning together how to shape a more responsible future. Ultimately, leadership is an interrelational, ecocentric capability. What we collectively are able to create, not by top-down transformation or big bang organizational restructuring, but evolutionary through networks of teams and continual co-creation everywhere. I know what you think now. That's utopia. Yet, Oscar Wilde once wrote, "A map of the world that does not include utopia is not worth even glancing at, for it leaves out the one country at which humanity is always landing." The truth is that we all have the power to reshape our relationships and organizations from who we are. Wherever we live in an organization, we can act within the envelope of our own permissions to create energy. We can go sideways and connect our network to create experiments. If we show vulnerability and the courage and compassion and selflessly address challenges that are bigger than ourselves, people will follow. And if we collectively believe in the power of a new model, and if we are willing to become part of its evolution, I believe it will arise. I've learned over the course of my career that transformation is always extremely personal. From my own strenuous journey, my relationships became richer. I'm more at ease with myself. I've accepted fear and I've grown. But I also had to learn that true purpose is not only beautiful poetry, but also what we are personally willing to give up or to struggle and to suffer for. It's about how much we dare to hope and how far we decide to push ourselves beyond our comfort zone. As St. Augustine once said, hope has two beautiful daughters. Their names are anger and courage. Anger at the way things are, and courage to see that they do not remain as they are. And if you're already courageous but still feel comfortable, make another step. And this truly completes our short travels together. Personally, I was already convinced before this crisis that we had arrived at an existential moment and it was urgent to act. And I think with the current pandemic, I do believe the urgency is even greater. This virus lays bare the frailty of our social contract, and the economic lockdowns shine a glaring light on existing inequalities and even create new ones. Today is the time where we have to occupy the front rows of our own lives and make choices. I believe that through our own transformations, we can gradually spark the liberation of our organizations, crafting the structures, processes, cultures needed to attain an environment where, for both individual development and the evolution of an emergent collective purpose. And together, our collective works can give rise to a new unifying cultural narrative, a new social big dream that will overcome the limitations of the social materialism we have today, where success is not only about money, but compassion, community, and character. Why will it work now? I hear you ask if it has never worked before. Because I believe for the first time in a generation, we are here and we are willing to look at ourselves in the mirror and see how we are all intrinsic part of a living eco-civilization that needs change, and to start with ourselves first. So let us together show the spirit of pioneers and adventurers and stride forward on this quest to reimagine ourselves and reshape our organizations for a better future. Let us together save the world and still be home for dinner. And I want to close with a big thank you to all those who have stimulated my journey to date, and of course to Steve and the whole team and partners for organizing such a wonderful conference. And I truly hope I've inspired some of you to pack your virtual sea bags and join us on this adventure. If not us, then who? If not now, then when? Good luck and be safe. Back to you, Steve.